Hello and welcome to the Promo Perspectives podcast presented by Sage, dedicated to giving promotional products, suppliers, and distributors tips, tricks, and insights to help them grow their businesses. I'm Gabe Gotay, Senior Marketing Coordinator here at Sage, and we have been doing a series all about digital marketing. We talked about general marketing strategies, building, executing, and measuring. We talked about brand marketing, marketing with a small team, marketing with a big team. But today I'm excited to talk about what I think is really the cornerstone and the heart of marketing, which is having passion for what you're doing, the creative things you're doing with your marketing, and why you do it. And so I'm joined today by a very special guest. Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves to the audience and tell them a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Gabe. My name is Jeremy Rossbach. I'm here on the East Coast, just a little bit south of Baltimore, between DC and Baltimore. And I spent my first 15 years of my career running data centers. So in the 90s, when everything was popping up, I was running data centers for the likes of Northrop Grumman and Department of Veterans Affairs, T. Rowe Price here in Baltimore, and some startups. And, in the 90s, tech was where you needed to be. It was good money. I did graduate with a marketing degree, but kind of fell into tech because it paid a lot more than an entry-level marketing position. And then 15 years later, I end up at my current company running data centers for them. They decided to consolidate a lot of their data centers and make the team smaller. And so I went back to my marketing career to use it to help evangelize the software that we sell for large data centers, monitoring and observability, and have been having a time in my life ever since.
And you use your marketing skills to evangelize more than just your own company's data centers, because you are also a podcaster, hence the very nice microphone setup there. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do with that podcast and kind of how you guide your marketing energies in a good way?
Yeah, thank you for the free plug. You can check out the NetOps Expert on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. And what it is network operations. So when I was running data centers, I had to do everything, but especially the routers and switches and the branch office links and out to the internet and all of that. And this is about how to gain better network observability practices and processes in what is a very complex IT landscape at the moment, especially with networks. COVID turned the way we work on our heads, and that means the way customer experiences are delivered over the network changed. We use more public ISP and cloud provider networks than we do our own enterprise corporate networks, because a lot of people are still working from home, or we've moved most of the applications out of a data center into cloud environments, which means you go straight through an ISP to get it. But none of the network teams have any observability into ISP or cloud environments. So how do you first troubleshoot when someone calls and complains they can't get to Office 365 when they're in a hotel in Tahiti and the Wi-Fi sucks, or they're in the corporate data center but only use it as a path through to get over the internet and into cloud environments. So I use that podcast to not only evangelize what my company is doing around network observability, but bring in network experts themselves, or NetOps experts, to talk about their challenges, their successes, any proof points. And, anybody in IT, especially running data centers, loves to hear from other folks in IT running data centers about what they ran into, how they fixed it, what was the solution, because they all run into the same challenges. So it's a great way to spread the word around how important network operations is to the enterprise, as well as share success stories with other customers out there.
And ultimately, that's what makes a podcast such a great marketing tool, because that's what marketing is, right? Is sharing stories, be they success stories or stories of who your company is. You also don't you do some podcasting and some marketing with nonprofits as well?
Yeah, I do. I recently spent a lot of time out in Phoenix over the winter and started taking tennis lessons, like most people do in the desert, and struck up a friendship with my tennis coach, who runs a nonprofit that empowers the underserved youth in the Phoenix area to not only take up tennis, but with that build determination and leadership and focus for the middle school and high school kids that are in that area that are underserved by the community. check it out at servethefuture.org. I recently just launched their website. And hey, whatever you can do to help that organization would be a blessing. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, and kind of the reason I wanted to talk about that too is where you're guiding your marketing efforts, both in your career or however you use those skills anywhere else in your life. I think it's a reflection of your own values in a way, right? And that can mean something really deep and impactful as working with nonprofits, or even something like your values of you're a techie guy, right? You have spent all this time working in tech, and so that's what you want to use your marketing skills to get out there into the world. Because I really, in our industry, we talked about this on some of our previous episodes, it's a lot of really small businesses, and so marketing is just kind of like another chore on the checklist. But I think for people that do marketing full time, there is a lot more kind of creativity and passion that goes into that. Can you kind of talk about how that's informed your marketing or kind of your creative passions?
Yeah, I'll start with what I just mentioned about Serve the Future. I'm used as the evangelist or tech influencer in my position. I'm at the apex of my career. I probably only got like 5 more years before I retire. So I'm very excited and proud to be able to be the face of this product and get out there in front of customers and help them decide where they need to go on their journey in IT. So I'm used to being in the spotlight, but with this organization, this nonprofit organization, I'm doing pro bono marketing work for them because, one, I believe in the mission that they have, but it is different to take a back seat when you work for an organization like this where they already have someone in the spotlight. So what I do is then draw on my creativity, like building websites, doing podcasts, creating promotional videos, writing blogs, all of that to elevate the voice of this nonprofit as well as the founder and executive director, and step back from the spotlight. I can be the guy behind the curtain pulling the levers and just being really excited that it's having an impact not only on the foundation but the kids that participate in it. Now, what I will say, and we talked about this before, listen, if you don't have passion in marketing, you're gonna be really bored. Marketing is. So let me say this. I'm dating myself, but there was a show in the 80s called 30-something, and it was these 2 guys who had an ad agency, and I fell in love with the fact that they could take, like any musician, Gabe, take anything in their head and put it down on paper or on an instrument and then have tens of thousands or however many people see it. Your creation in your head gets seen, and yay or nay, people like it or not, but it's still, you get to put it out there. And so with marketing, I like that aspect of giving something to the rest of the world that is a creative idea in my head. And when it comes to me running data centers back in the day, I use those war stories. I mean, I was woken up at 3 a.m. with a cell phone call that a server went down, or this branch office was offline at 4 a.m. And I remember those war stories. I brought down more than one office because I misconfigured a router in the middle of the day when I should have been doing it at night. And I take all that great experience as the end user, and I develop really personal relationships or a trust relationship with my customers that I'm meeting with. I was there with you. I know what you're going through. I get it. And it builds a solid foundation for me to take what I'm very passionate about, which is not only tech, but creativity, and deliver content to folks that are meaningful, not that collects dust. Because we all know as marketers, it could take you a full day to create a 3-minute video, and if it's out there and no one sees it, it's pretty disappointing.
Well, and you kind of just talked about what the 2 arms of marketing are, right? There is the story that you're going to tell, which, like the example you gave, I was there with you, we've been through this and this very specific thing in our industry and our niche. And then there's kind of the marketing hard skills, the creative skills of, like you said, producing that podcast, building that website, creating those social media graphics. And I do think there is a lot of natural overlap in the kinds of people that are going to want to do that for a profession, and then have other creative pursuits that kind of drive that and keep that alive. Like, we've got people in our department here at Sage in the marketing department that are authors that write books. We've got people that are graphic designers that make comic books in their free time, like web comics. And, you know, like you mentioned, musicians. And actually, I think that's a kind of a fun way to talk. You know, Jeremy, you want to tell the audience a little bit about how we even met in the first place?
Yeah. And listen, I know Gabe would agree with this. If I could be a musician full time and make the same money I'm making now, we wouldn't be on this podcast. But because that's my true creativity. Yeah. So I was speaking, as I do a lot, at these tech conferences in Dallas. What's it been, about a month now?
Yeah.
Something like that. And at the end of the last day, like most tech conferences, they throw a big celebration. Well, they threw a big celebration in the heart of the city of Dallas at a brewery. And lo and behold, Gabe's band was there playing for the entire party. And what I found really interesting, Gabe, and I know we talked about this before, but I struggle with it. His band knew that there were going to be a bunch of dweebs coming up and wanting to play their instruments and see if they could sing, because it's fun. It gets the audience into it, and it's a fun way to connect with people and see their bravery. Well, as a musician for the last 30, 40 years, they usually ask me to go up first to kind of get the rest of the crowd into it. And what do? We did some Radiohead. We did some Maroon 5.
We did some Dave Grohl, didn't we? Some Foo Fighters?
Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters. And I think we did that song Laid by James that was big back in the 90s. And listen, I have to say, you guys are the most welcoming band I've ever seen. Like, your bass player was just so nice and over the top with him thanking me as well as you guys. Great kudos on the singing and the playing, and it was a lot of fun. And then I think I saw you posted something on LinkedIn about the event, and I contacted you and said, hey man, let's get together if we can sometime.
Yeah, that was kind of cool. It was the people who had hosted the event, they shared a video of you playing, and it was the first time that I'd ever seen, because, obviously we share videos anytime my band plays gigs on our band social media, but I've usually had a pretty strict separation of church and state between my work life and the band life on LinkedIn. But it was the first time, and it was super cool to get to actually, you were like, you're in marketing and have a podcast, I'm in marketing and have a podcast.
Yeah.
But, and I appreciate your kind words. And what you're saying about, like, when we talked about this before, there's a lot of bands that might have been more persnickety about letting other people come up and use their instruments and jam with them, maybe like a little snobby about, I'm here to play.
Exactly.
But because music is not my profession, it's a creative passion, and this ties into why I work in marketing. I love collaboration with creativity, right? Like, playing gigs is fun, but what's more fun to me is going to a local jam circle or a blues jam and sitting in and watching people and seeing what everybody has to offer to this creative conversation. And that same energy transfers into marketing. Like, we did. So in this series that we've been doing on this podcast about marketing strategies, the last 2 episodes that we just did, one was I had a buddy of mine who he is essentially the entire marketing department for a small business, which is pretty typical, especially for businesses in our industry. And then I had, in the episode after that, my boss here at Sage, who has a team of over a dozen people. And one of the things that's really great about having a creative team is it's just like music. When you've got, great video producers like, Taylor and LaFonso back here, you've got great graphic designers like our teams, Tori and Drew and Brittany, great copywriters like Tiffany, and project managers, social media people, Anne Marie and Nicole, all these people who don't get, I'm saying their names because they do not get enough attention. I end up being the person that's always on camera and talking, but all I'm doing is trying to connect the pieces as a project manager and using my general creative skills to try to find what's going to make certain projects work. But actually seeing these pieces come together, like this podcast, for example, right? Like, I didn't have all these cameras or the skills to run them through all these mixers. The designs that we have for it, the branding that was designed, it's phenomenal. And it's amazing to have these kinds of connections. And I do think it's kind of the difference between marketing and sales in a way is a creative technical passion, because there's a lot of overlap, I think, between marketing and sales, but I think that's kind of the key distinction.
And I will say something. I think some folks, especially me, there's a fine line between being okay with collaborating on a project and not getting your feelings hurt when you submit some of that project. Like, I mean, you could spend hours on a 3-minute video editing it. I mean, you have to get so granular to milliseconds sometimes. And then you go and you send it to your team for review and they pick it apart. And I had to kind of suck it up many, many years ago and make this transition because I used to be the only marketer for this solution, but it grew so big, we had to hire more marketing people. So I had to learn how to share. And it was difficult. I mean, I'm taking something in my head, I'm putting it down on quote unquote paper, and I got to get your review on it. I mean, who are you, And so it's a fine line between learning how to let go of that kind of unhealthy behavior of not wanting input because you created something, and valuing others' opinions, because we can't think of everything. I can't think of everything. We get tunnel vision, right, when we work by ourselves so much. So it took some time for me to share my toys, so to say, but now my team is invaluable, and I don't know what I would do without them. So
I think it's a skill that you have to learn on both ends, so how to receive that criticism and how to give it, because it's easy to lose control of your tone or just be unaware of your tone when you're giving criticism, and that can make it a lot harder for that person to receive it. But just like with writing a white paper for your marketing department, making that video with those 30 millisecond edits, or writing a song, right? If somebody is giving you feedback on it, that's honestly a compliment, right? That is them saying, if they didn't like it, if they thought it was worthless, they wouldn't be giving you feedback to improve it. They would be saying, let's do something else.
Yep.
And, that is on the creative side of things too. Like with music, I found a lot of people are afraid to give that feedback depending on who you're talking to, like your friends and your family, be like, wow, that song is great. But then you go into, I remember when we recorded our album in the studio, and it was so great to have a producer and he was very kind. He knew we were kids too, who were passionate about this. And if he knew there was something off, he'd be like, hey, what if we tried this? What if you didn't do that there? What if he did something else here? And that kind of energy that's what makes collaboration great. Because I do think collaboration is not a sum, it's a multiple. So like if you have 2 people, or say if you have 3 people working on something, it's exponentially better to the power of 3. It's not just 3 times better.
And I think not only like I'll use myself, has to learn to share his toys and receive criticism in a positive way, but I'm heavy into mental health and have been for a long time now, and all of our brains are wired differently. So when that producer says to you, hey, why don't we try this? It's nice to kind of know the person and understand how they take feedback, and then maybe just phrase it in a way that is more positive and collaborative, right? Instead of saying, that sucks, do it this way, this is my way, and do it that way. So
I want to go back to some of these marketing kind of hard creative skills that you were talking about, like, the web design, all those kinds of things. You said you went to school for marketing, right? Ended up working in tech and then slid back into marketing. But did those skills come from before your time in school, and that's what guided you into taking that course of education? Or did something else guide you to that, and then you discovered those skills?
So it's the latter, because I'm dating myself again. When I graduated college, there was no YouTube, there was no blog sites, there was, barely any websites in the early 90s. So that was something, well, you bring up a really good point. So because of the 90s and because of the tech boom, it changed the way advertising is done. I grew up in Baltimore, and my first instinct out of college was to move to New York or LA and get into the ad business. I wanted to be in a conference room, brainstorming, draw things out, whiteboard everything, and have a 60-second commercial that's super creative out of my head be seen by everyone. But that's not really done anymore. I mean, the way we market, the way we advertise is so digital now, that those kind of vehicles for marketing didn't come out until, well into the mid 2000s or something. with YouTube and blog sites and digital advertisements, you know. So it's something I had to learn, but I'm techie enough to figure it out. And I find video creation quite creative too. Everything I do in marketing, I find very creative, more than most. And I'm trying to like understand exactly why. You know, when you're editing a video, you're writing a blog, you're creating a podcast, you get very focused. I mean, you get like tunnel vision focused. And I find that to be a nice area in my head I like to be in. Shut out all the noise, focus on one thing, and especially being creative. Same thing with music. Like I'm writing music right now, and I got to be in a quiet place, no distractions, and I mean, you know how it is. You can spend hours playing the same 4 chords and going over the first verse until you finally get it right. Being in that creative moment where you're dialed in, it's a pretty special feeling. It really is.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, you talked about the importance of mental health, and I do think that getting into that creative flow, it serves a healthy, almost, you know, to a term, spiritual experience to be in that flow. Like, you know, there's different aspects. I'm in kind of project management in marketing at this point in my career. I do my best to involve myself with the creative sides of the projects, but there's parts of my job that are not so creative. There's filling out data for reports and things like that. And I feel the difference in my mind where I'm grinding through the boring data collection stuff versus when I'm writing a script for a topic that I'm passionate about, or I'm doing an interview with somebody that I can connect with. You find yourself in a flow where you're not thinking about all of these other things. And if you apply that to things like either, you know, mental health on the more clinical side or spirituality on that side of things, that does open to that idea of being present and mindful that is so good for your state of being, and it creates a better work product overall. You know,
Gabe, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm looking at like a dozen self-help books and mental health books right next to me on my desk. I like that point you brought up. I mean, I was you know, tiptoeing around it, but you nailed it. To be able to have that mindful focus where you are dialed in, it's very productive. It's super creative. You can be super proud of yourself immediately. And whether you leave it half done or a quarter of the way done, you can leave knowing that you put your best effort into it, and you can come back to it and dial in again.
There's a book that I recommend to all creative types called The Creative Act. It's by a producer named Rick Rubin, who you might not know who he is by his name, but if you have listened to music in the past 30 years, you have listened to something that he was involved in. And the whole book, it's not really a self-help book in a very strict sense, but it's much more like these are practices that you can take to put yourself into the space to being open to being creative and being in the right headspace for it. And I found just reading that, it made me a better marketer, it made me a better musician, and I think it made me a more peaceful human being. And a lot of this kind of stuff, I feel like, compared especially to some of the other topics we've talked about on this podcast before, like specific marketing strategies and marketing channels, or, you know, we're in promo, so decoration methods. This might sound a little wooey compared to all of that, but I think people are pretty aware at this point how closely related your work product is to how you take care of yourself as a human being. And that's kind of the core of what I wanted to get at in this episode is I can't speak to every other career. I'm a marketer. And I know for marketing, creativity and passion, it plays a really important role beyond just those hard skills that go into the job.
Yeah, I like that you said that because I wanted to circle back. Like, you know, I am very involved in my positive mental health and do a lot of retreats and meditation retreats. But, you know, there's a lot of marketers out there, especially in tech, that all they do is use scare tactics, you know, like you're not ready for AI or you're not ready for this disruptive technology, so contact us. And I take a different approach because not only because I used to be the end user running data centers, I'm at a point in my life where I just want to lead with love and lead with compassion. And instead of scaring them, I'll be like, let's get ready. And this is the journey you can take to get ready for AI or get ready for this disruptive technology while, realizing business success with cost reduction and revenue protection and brand protection, stuff like that. Then you can engage with folks easier than, just regurgitating what every other marketer out there is saying about you can't do this without us ever kind of thing.
Well, and that ties back to why in the beginning I wanted you to talk about your nonprofit marketing, because something you and I talked about in a previous conversation was the importance of what you are marketing and selling and how that impacts you as a person. Because, for me, when I was, about 10 years ago, when I was a really young kid, I had a very brief stint in car sales. And there are plenty of car dealerships that do things just fine, and I worked for one that did things just fine, but there was something about the method of sales where the goal is just to get people to spend money so you can make that money. And it didn't sit well with me, so I moved in my career, I moved into marketing. At some point, I began worried where in marketing, fundamentally what you're doing is sharing a message to meet a business goal. But that is not an unethical thing to do. You have to have your own ethics of what is that business goal, what is it you're sharing, and how are you doing it? And exactly like you said, not using scare tactics, just being honest in communication. Offer a powerful product and service to this world that you agree in, and it is easy to effectively market it.
Yeah. If you believe in it, it's so easy. And as the end user, I used to use a portion of the solution that I represent at my company because it's been around for a while, and it was invaluable and saved my butt a million times that I dropped some device or bounced something in the middle of the day I shouldn't have. And yeah, it's a really good point. If you believe in it, it's so easy to market. It's just so easy to market. I don't need slides anymore behind me on a big stage. I could talk about this stuff in my sleep because I lived it and I believe in it. And how much more fun can you have? Listen, I say this all the time, and Gabe's definitely going to agree with me. From a creative standpoint, there's no better high than to be on stage, for someone like me at least, where you can have an audience in your hand and tell your story or sing your story and make them feel better. Whether it's better about their work, better about their end of year revenue that they're expecting to get, or the fact that we just played their favorite song and it reminded them of their wedding day. That's very powerful to be able to bridge people to an idea that they may like or not like, but you've given them enough information to decide for themselves, but you're that bridge. And maybe without you, they wouldn't have had that feeling for that moment or that idea that day that would help them down the road. It's pretty powerful. And that's why I don't want to be in sales, because I don't want to be tied to a quota. It would keep me up all night long, hence my mental health work and all my anxiety that we all live with. So I'd rather be the creative side and not be stuck with a quota and help the folks that are stuck with a quota use my material to gain traction and leads.
I'm very much that same way. Well, Jeremy, this is kind of a short form podcast that we do, so we don't have a lot of time left. I have one more thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's a little more technical and less philosophical than most of this episode has been. But I know that a lot of the work you do, from what I've seen in the companies that you work with, does work with AI quite a bit, be it on the technical side of the server centers and the tech companies that you're working for. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is earlier you were talking about kind of keeping up with evolving marketing technologies and trends, and that's something that you noticed a big shift in the 90s, but the scale of technology is logarithmic, right? It's exponentially constantly changing, and this is the new biggest one. So question for you to kind of wrap it up before I get your final thoughts. How has AI changed the way you're doing your marketing?
I love this question because 3 months ago, I was like, I hate AI. It's going to steal my creativity. I don't want to use it, but our company's kind of like forcing us to use it because it can make you more productive. But I was like an old man. No, I want to write it all myself. I want to draw it all myself. I, edit it all myself. That's my happy place. But, you start AI for marketers. I think you need to decide what you want to do and how you're going to do it. For example, like you should never ask an AI to write a blog for you without submitting most of that blog yourself to it and just asking it to be more concise, maybe write it in a more formal tone if you're not a writer. I use AI a lot now, especially in the nonprofit world, to generate images for the website. So, a little kid playing tennis on the tennis court, especially today. And it was beautiful. I've definitely jumped on the AI bandwagon. I had to create these 15-second and 30-second audio promos for my podcast. And they'll be played to folks who are listening to other podcasts, like commercials in the middle. And I have to get it to exactly 30 seconds, not 29, not 30.5. It has to be exact for this vehicle to use them. And so I'm trying to shorten the script as much as I can, and from writing it in Word. And I'm like, screw this. I just uploaded the script. I probably had 33 seconds of voiceover for it. And I said, shorten this to 30 seconds and keep all the main points and passion that's in this little line. And, 3.5 seconds later, it spit it out, and it wrote it better than I could and made it exactly 30 seconds. And I could have wasted an hour with this word or this sentence and trying to lock it down to 30 seconds. From an efficiency standpoint, AI is wonderful for marketing. Our sales teams use it in a wonderful way. If you're going to write, as a sales guy, if you're going to write a business plan and present it to customers in hopes to get a meeting and start selling your software, that customer wants to know that you know everything about their initiatives, whether it's this year or what they're looking forward to next year, their IT budget, et cetera. And with AI, you can gather all that information now because it's public on the internet. Put it into some proposal. We understand that your initiative is this. You're challenged with this. Let us help you here to get to success at the end of the road. And you come in looking pretty educated about what the customer's trying to achieve.
I think that's the great way to work it, especially, we've talked about this whole balance between creative hobbies and pursuits and then the creative profession. It is such an amazing tool, and it's invaluable for your time. Now, of course, there is the other side of things, like you said. Do you like writing things? Me personally, I'm not going to be using AI to write lyrics. I'm not going to be using AI to write books, but I am absolutely going to be using it to make my marketing day-to-day a lot easier.
Wait, I have to tell you one thing, Gabe, and I know we're over probably, but just yesterday or the day before, I'm writing this song, and I couldn't figure out how to transition from one chord to the next. So the ear loved it. You know what I mean? Naturally in music, you only have a certain amount of notes to work with, and they all transition to each other in a certain way that pleases the ear. I couldn't figure it out. You know what I did? So I said, ChatGPT, these are the chords of my song, and I'm stuck at this chord and how to transition to the next that leads into these chords. What's that next step that leads me beautifully into the next progression of chords? And it gave it to me, and right away, and said, try the F, because it'll make it sound like this. But if you want, alternatively, you can try an A minor, which will give a more mysterious vibe, as you build to that next chorus or something. And so that was helpful,
Yeah, it's using it as a research tool, which is very valuable, because that's very few musicians, honestly, have that much music theory where they're not going to have to Google that kind of thing anyway. So if you can use this, I really do feel like AI has replaced a Google search in a lot of ways.
I agree with you completely. Absolutely.
Well, all right, Jeremy. Well, are there any other thoughts that you would like to leave the audience with, or plugs that you would like to make?
Just real quick. And Gabe, I want to thank you and the team for having me on. Once again, my podcast around tech and networking is the NetOps Expert, NetOps, NETOPS Expert on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, as well as the really great nonprofit I'm working with, Changing Lives in the Southwest region of Arizona, and that is servethefuture.org.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thanks so much for coming on and chatting with me. It was awesome to get to meet you at the event, and great getting to talk to you and having you as a guest. Let's do some more work together soon.
Definitely. Thank you, bud.
All right. Have a good day.